The wagon wheels groaned against the dry earth as Brennan Kessler urged his horses forward through the scorching Colorado plains, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever beneath a dusty canvas tarp not 3 feet behind him. It was August 1876, and the sun hung merciless over Las Animas like a judge pronouncing sentence. Brennan had spent the better part of 3 days purchasing supplies in Pueblo, loading his wagon with flour, salt pork, ammunition, and tools he would need for the winter months ahead at his ranch. The journey back was supposed to be simple, uneventful even, just him and the endless stretch of prairie grass turning gold under the late summer heat. He had no reason to suspect that, when he had stepped away from his wagon to settle his account at the general store, a desperate woman had climbed aboard and buried herself beneath the heavy tarp covering his goods. Brennan was 26 years old, tall and lean from years of hard work, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of weathered leather. He had inherited the ranch from his father 2 years prior, after a winter fever had taken both his parents within a week of each other. Since then, he had thrown himself into the work, rising before dawn and collapsing into bed long after sunset, trying to build something that would make them proud. He rarely went into town, and when he did, he kept to himself. People respected him but did not know him well. He preferred it that way. The afternoon stretched long and quiet. Brennan let the reins rest loose in his hands, trusting his horses to follow the familiar trail. His mind wandered to the fence posts that needed replacing on the eastern boundary, and whether he should try to expand his herd come spring. The rhythmic creaking of the wagon and the steady clip of hooves created a lulling pattern that nearly put him to sleep in his seat. Then he heard it. A soft rustle, barely audible over the ambient noise of travel. His hand instinctively moved toward the rifle resting beside him, every muscle suddenly alert. Living alone on the frontier had taught him to notice things others might miss. A second sound followed, like fabric shifting against wood. Brennan pulled the horses to a stop and sat perfectly still, listening. The prairie stretched empty in all directions, nothing but grass and sky. But the sound had definitely come from behind him. He turned slowly, eyes fixed on the tarp covering his supplies. Nothing moved. He waited, counting his own heartbeats. Another rustle, and this time he saw the canvas shift slightly near the back of the wagon bed. His jaw tightened. Could be a coyote that had somehow climbed aboard, or maybe a prairie dog looking for food. But something in his gut told him otherwise. He stood carefully, balancing in the swaying wagon, and reached back to grab the edge of the tarp. In one swift motion, he yanked it aside. A woman stared up at him with wide, terrified eyes the color of summer violets. She was curled into a tight ball between 2 crates of canned goods, her dark blonde hair falling loose around her shoulders, her dress torn and dusty. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Brennan saw the way her whole body trembled, saw the bruise darkening along her cheekbone, saw the desperate way her fingers clutched at her own arms as if trying to hold herself together. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please do not make me go back." Brennan lowered the tarp slowly, his mind racing. Every instinct told him this woman was running from something bad, and whatever it was had left marks on her skin. He looked into those violet eyes and saw such raw fear that it made his chest tighten. He should ask questions. He should demand to know who she was and what she was running from. He should probably turn the wagon around and take her back to Pueblo where the sheriff could sort this out properly. Instead, he settled back into his seat, picked up the reins, and clicked his tongue to get the horses moving again. Behind him, he heard a small, choked sound that might have been a sob of relief. He kept his eyes forward on the trail ahead, but his awareness remained fixed on the woman hidden in his wagon. Whatever trouble she was in, he had just made it his own. They traveled in silence for another hour. The sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Brennan knew they would reach his ranch before full dark if they maintained this pace. He had no idea what he was going to do once they got there. Finally, unable to bear the quiet any longer, he spoke without turning around. "There is water in the canteen tied to the left side. Help yourself if you need it." Another pause, then he heard her moving carefully, the sound of the canteen being untied and the cork being pulled. She drank deeply, and he tried not to think about how long she might have been hiding in his wagon without water under this brutal sun. "Thank you," she said softly when she had finished. Her voice was refined, educated, not what he had expected. "I know you must have questions." "I expect I do," Brennan replied, keeping his tone neutral. "But they can wait until we are somewhere safe and you have had something to eat." "Where are you taking me?" "My ranch. About another 2 hours northeast of here." "It is not much, but it is far from the main road and people do not come around unless invited." He heard her exhale slowly, as if she had been holding her breath. "And then what?" Brennan finally glanced back over his shoulder. She had pushed herself up to a sitting position, though she still looked ready to bolt like a frightened deer. "And then you tell me what you are running from, and we figure out what to do about it. Fair enough." She studied his face for a long moment, and he let her look, let her search for whatever she needed to see. Finally, she nodded. "Fair enough. My name is Penelope Vance. Brennan Kessler." He touched the brim of his hat, an automatic gesture of courtesy his mother had drilled into him years ago. "You can stay under the tarp if it makes you feel safer, or you can come up here and sit beside me. I suspect it is probably cooler up front with the breeze." Penelope hesitated, clearly weighing the risks of being visible versus the discomfort of remaining hidden. The heat won out. She climbed carefully forward, moving around the crates and supplies until she could lower herself onto the wagon seat beside him. She left as much space between them as possible, pressed against the far edge of the bench. Brennan gave her time to settle, then offered her his hat. "Sun is still strong. This will help." She took it with trembling fingers and placed it on her head. It was far too large and sat low over her eyebrows, but she pulled it down gratefully. "You are very kind," she murmured. "Most men would have questions first." "Most men have never been desperate enough to hide in a stranger's wagon," Brennan replied. He kept his eyes on the trail, trying to give her some semblance of privacy despite their close quarters. "I figure whatever drove you to that is bad enough that questions can wait a few hours." They fell into silence again, but this time it felt less strained. Brennan was acutely aware of her presence beside him, the way she held herself rigid and alert, the occasional tremor that ran through her frame. He wondered who had given her that bruise, wondered what else might be hidden beneath her torn dress. The anger that stirred in his chest at the thought surprised him with its intensity. As the sun continued to sink, Penelope gradually began to relax, her posture easing slightly. She watched the landscape pass with apparent fascination, and Brennan found himself seeing the familiar terrain through fresh eyes. The way the grass rippled like water in the breeze, the distant purple smudge of mountains against the horizon, the vast open sky that seemed to go on forever. "It is beautiful," she said quietly. "I have never seen anything like it. You are not from around here, then?" "Boston." The single word carried a weight of meaning. "My father brought me west 3 months ago. He had business in Denver, or so he said." Brennan heard the bitterness in her voice and decided not to press. She would tell him when she was ready. Instead, he pointed toward a line of cottonwoods in the distance. "My property starts just beyond those trees. The house is about a mile past that. How much land do you have? 400 acres, give or take. About 100 head of cattle at last count, though I will know better after the fall roundup. You run it yourself? Mostly. I hire on a few extra hands during branding and roundup season, but day to day it is just me. He glanced at her sideways. Gets lonely sometimes, but it is honest work. Penelope nodded slowly, and he thought he saw something wistful pass across her face. Honest work sounds nice. They crossed onto his land as the sky turned deep purple, stars beginning to emerge like pinpricks in dark velvet. The ranch house came into view, a simple structure built from local timber, with a wide porch and a stone chimney. It was not grand by any measure, but Brennan had built it with his own hands alongside his father, and every board and nail represented hours of labor and hope for the future. He pulled the wagon to a stop near the barn and set the brake. His horses stamped and snorted, eager for their evening feed and rest. Brennan climbed down and turned to help Penelope, but she had already descended on her own, moving stiffly as if every muscle ached. "Come inside," he said, leading her toward the house. "I will get the horses settled and then fix us something to eat." "I can help," Penelope offered. "It is the least I can do." Brennan studied her in the fading light. She looked exhausted, her face pale beneath the dust and grime of travel. But her chin was lifted with determination, and he recognized the need to feel useful, to contribute rather than simply accept charity. "All right," he agreed. "Let me show you where things are." The interior of the house was Spartan but clean. A main room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace on one wall and a sturdy table with 2 chairs near the window. A single bedroom opened off to the left, and Brennan gestured toward it as they entered. "You will sleep there. I will make up a bedroll out here." Penelope turned to him quickly. "I cannot take your bed. You have already done so much." "It is not up for debate," Brennan said firmly. "I will not have a guest, especially a lady, sleeping on the floor when there is a perfectly good bed available." She opened her mouth as if to argue further, then seemed to think better of it. "Thank you," she said instead. "Truly." Brennan nodded and moved to light the lamps. Warm, golden light filled the room, pushing back the darkness. He showed Penelope where he kept his stores of food, the pump for water at the kitchen counter, the cast iron stove he used for cooking. She listened attentively, her quick intelligence evident in the way she absorbed every detail. "I need to see to the horses," he said when he had finished the tour. "There is a wash basin in the bedroom if you would like to clean up. I will not be long." He left her alone in the house and walked back out to the barn, leading his tired horses to their stalls. The familiar routine of unharnessing, brushing down, and feeding his animals gave him time to think. He had just brought a stranger into his home, a woman running from something serious enough to make her risk hiding in a random wagon. He knew nothing about her beyond her name and the fear in her eyes, but he had seen that bruise on her face, seen the terror when she begged him not to make her go back. Whatever she was running from, he could not in good conscience send her back to it, not without knowing the full story at least. When he returned to the house 20 minutes later, he found Penelope at the stove, stirring something in a pot that smelled like heaven. She had washed her face and hands and attempted to pin up her hair, though several strands had escaped to frame her face. She looked up when he entered, and he saw that her eyes were red as if she had been crying. "I hope you do not mind," she said, gesturing to the pot. "I found some dried beans and salt pork. I have them simmering with some onions I found in the root cellar." "Mind." "I cannot remember the last time someone cooked for me." Brennan removed his hat and hung it by the door, then moved to wash his own hands at the pump. "Smells wonderful." They worked together in comfortable silence. Penelope finishing the simple meal while Brennan sliced bread he had purchased in Pueblo and set the table. When everything was ready, they sat across from each other, and Brennan bowed his head to say a quiet grace. Penelope followed his example, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The food was simple but good, and Brennan ate with appreciation. He noticed that Penelope picked at her portion, managing only a few bites despite what must be considerable hunger. Her hands shook slightly as she lifted the spoon. "You should eat," he said gently. "You will feel better with something warm in your stomach. I know I am just—" She trailed off, setting down her spoon. "I am sorry. I keep thinking about what I have done, running away like this, the trouble I might have brought to your doorstep." Brennan set down his own spoon and looked at her directly. "Why do not you tell me about it? The whole story from the beginning?" Penelope took a shaky breath and wrapped her arms around herself. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My father is Marcus Vance. He owns a shipping company in Boston, quite successful. After my mother died last year, he became different, distant and cold. He started making business trips west, leaving me alone for months at a time with only the servants for company." She paused, gathering her courage. Brennan waited patiently, giving her the space to continue at her own pace. "3 months ago, he told me we were moving to Denver. He said there were opportunities in the mining industry, that we would make our fortune. I did not want to leave everything I knew, but I had no choice. When we arrived, I discovered the truth. He had sold me." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Brennan felt his hands curl into fists beneath the table, but he kept his expression neutral, not wanting to frighten her with his anger. "There is a man named Silas Garrett," Penelope continued, her voice hollow. "He owns several mines and a great deal of property around Denver. He is also nearly 50 years old and has buried 2 wives already. My father arranged for us to marry. He received a substantial payment in return, enough to settle his debts and fund his new business ventures." "You did not agree to this," Brennan said. "It was not a question. I tried to refuse. I begged my father to reconsider, told him I could not marry a man I did not love, a man older than he was. He said I was being childish and ungrateful. He said I would learn to accept my duty." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Silas came to dinner 2 weeks ago. He looked at me like I was a horse he was purchasing, inspecting his investment. When I objected to something he said, he struck me across the face and told my father he would need to train me better before the wedding." Brennan saw red. His vision actually narrowed, and it took every ounce of self-control he possessed to remain seated and calm. "Your father allowed this. He apologized to Silas for my behavior and assured him I would be more compliant in the future." Tears streamed down Penelope's face now, but she made no move to wipe them away. "That night, I packed a small bag and left. I had a little money I had saved, hidden from my father. I bought a ticket to Pueblo, thinking I could perhaps find work there, start a new life. But when I arrived, I saw 2 men who worked for Silas asking questions at the train station, showing people a photograph of me. So you hid in my wagon. I saw you loading supplies and you seemed kind. I know it was reckless and foolish, but I was terrified they would find me and drag me back. I climbed in while you were inside the store and buried myself under the tarp. I thought perhaps I could slip away once we reached your destination, disappear into the countryside." She finally met his eyes, her own swimming with unshed tears. "I never meant to involve you in this mess. I am so sorry." Brennan stood and moved around the table, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, he reached out and took her hands in his. They were small and cold despite the warmth of the evening. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his voice low and steady. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. You were trying to save yourself from a terrible situation, and you showed remarkable courage in doing so. No woman should be bought and sold like property, and no man has the right to strike you for speaking your mind. But I have put you in danger, Penelope protested. If Silas discovers you helped me, he will come after you. He is a powerful man with resources and connections. Let him come, Brennan said flatly. This is my land, and out here his money and influence do not mean much. You are safe here, Penelope. I give you my word. She searched his face, and whatever she saw there seemed to reassure her. She sagged forward, and he caught her as she began to truly cry, all the terror and exhaustion and grief pouring out in wrenching sobs. Brennan held her carefully, one hand supporting her back while the other smoothed over her hair, murmuring quiet reassurances the way his mother used to do when he was small and frightened. They stayed like that until her tears subsided into hiccups and shaky breaths. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes swollen, but some of the haunted tension had eased from her features. I am sorry, she said again, but this time it was for crying on him. Do not be. I think you needed that. Brennan stood and fetched her a clean cloth to dry her face. Why do not you get some rest? Tomorrow we can figure out what to do next, but tonight you are safe. That is enough for now. Penelope nodded and rose unsteadily to her feet. She looked toward the bedroom, then back at him. Thank you, Brennan. I know I keep saying it, but I do not know what else to say. You could have turned me in or sent me away, but you chose kindness instead. I will not forget that. Sleep well, Penelope. He watched her disappear into the bedroom and closed the door softly behind her. Then he cleared the table, washed the dishes, and made up a bedroll on the floor near the fireplace. He lay down fully clothed, his rifle within easy reach, and stared up at the dark ceiling. Sleep did not come easily. His mind kept replaying everything Penelope had told him, kept imagining her trapped in a marriage to a man who thought violence was an appropriate response to disagreement. He thought about her father, who had valued money over his own daughter's happiness and safety. The anger that had ignited when she first told her story still burned hot in his chest, but beneath the anger was something else, something he was almost afraid to examine too closely. When he had looked into Penelope's violet eyes, when he had held her trembling hands in his, he had felt something shift in his chest, like a lock turning in a door he had kept closed for a very long time. He was in trouble, he realized. Deep trouble of a completely different kind than he had anticipated. The next morning, Brennan woke before dawn out of long habit. He dressed quietly and slipped outside to begin his morning chores, feeding the horses and chickens, checking water troughs, and inspecting fence lines near the house. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten when he returned, expecting to find Penelope still asleep. Instead, he found her in the kitchen, dressed in the same torn dress but looking more rested than the night before. She had somehow managed to repair the worst of the tears with needle and thread she must have found in his mending kit, and her hair was pinned up neatly. She looked up from the stove where she was frying eggs and smiled tentatively. Good morning. I hope I did not overstep, but I thought you might be hungry. Brennan felt something warm bloom in his chest at the domestic scene. You certainly did not need to do this, but I will not lie and say I am not grateful. That smells wonderful. They ate breakfast together as golden sunlight streamed through the windows. Penelope seemed calmer this morning, more settled, though he noticed she still startled at unexpected sounds. They discussed practical matters, what work needed doing around the ranch, what supplies they had, how long they could remain hidden before someone might come looking. I need to be realistic, Penelope said, setting down her fork. I cannot stay here forever. Silas will not stop searching for me, and my father has too much invested in this arrangement to simply let me go. I need to figure out where I can go, somewhere far enough away that they will not find me. California, maybe, Brennan suggested, or north to Montana. Plenty of places a person can disappear if they want to start fresh. That requires money, which I have very little of, and traveling alone as a woman is dangerous. She bit her lip, thinking, perhaps I could find work somewhere, save enough to make the journey safely. You could stay here, Brennan heard himself say. The words were out before he could think better of them. I mean, not permanently unless you wanted to, but for as long as you need. There is plenty of work around a ranch, and frankly, I could use the help. I could pay you wages, give you time to save up and make a proper plan. Penelope stared at him. You would do that. Let me stay here and work for you. Why not? You have already proven yourself useful, and it is not as if we are in town where people would gossip. Out here, nobody comes around to notice or care. He felt heat creep up his neck at the intensity of her gaze. It is a practical solution, that is all. A slow smile spread across her face, the first real smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her completely. Then I accept, Mr. Kessler. You have yourself a ranch hand. Brennan, he corrected. If we are going to be working together, you should call me Brennan. Brennan, she repeated, testing the name. And you must call me Penelope, not Miss Vance. I am trying to leave that life behind. They shook hands across the table, her small palm fitting neatly into his larger one, and Brennan felt that same strange shifting in his chest, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Brennan taught Penelope the basics of ranch work, starting with the simpler tasks like feeding chickens and gathering eggs, mucking out stalls, and tending the vegetable garden his mother had planted years ago that he had barely kept alive. She proved to be a quick learner, attacking each new challenge with determination, even when it was clear she had never done physical labor before. He watched her transform over those first weeks. The fear gradually faded from her eyes, replaced by growing confidence. The bruise on her cheek yellowed and disappeared. She learned to move with purpose and efficiency, her soft hands developing calluses, her pale skin taking on a healthy glow from hours in the sun. She borrowed some of his old shirts and had altered one of his spare pairs of trousers to fit her, claiming dresses were impractical for ranch work. Brennan tried not to notice how the masculine clothing somehow made her look even more feminine, or how his heart skipped when she laughed at something one of the chickens did. They talked while they worked, sharing stories of their vastly different lives. Brennan told her about growing up on the ranch, about his parents and the dreams they had held for this land. He described the harsh winters and the joy of spring calving season, the satisfaction of watching a herd thrive under his care. He even told her about the loneliness that sometimes crept in during the long evenings, the wondering if he would always be alone. Penelope shared carefully edited versions of her life in Boston, describing grand parties and the theater, libraries full of books and museums packed with art. She talked about her mother, who had encouraged her love of learning and reading, who had believed women should be educated and independent. She spoke of her dreams to perhaps teach someday, to use her education to help others. I suppose that sounds foolish now, she said one afternoon as they mended a section of fence together. A woman like me, with my reputation ruined by running away, thinking I could be a teacher. It does not sound foolish at all, Brennan replied, hammering a new post into place. Sounds like a fine dream to me. The world needs good teachers, and you are clearly smart enough for it. She looked at him with such warmth that he had to turn away, focusing intently on his work to hide the sudden emotion threatening to overwhelm him. As summer faded into early autumn, they grew more comfortable with each other, their conversations ranging from playful banter to deep philosophical discussions. Brennan found himself looking forward to meals, to the evenings they spent on the porch watching the sunset, to the sound of her voice humming while she worked. He noticed small things: the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, the precise way she organized the kitchen, the gentleness with which she handled the animals. He was falling in love with her. The realization struck him one morning as he watched her in the corral, laughing as one of the young horses nuzzled her shoulder looking for treats. The sun caught her hair, turning it to spun gold, and her face was alight with pure joy. His heart clenched so hard he had to grip the fence rail to steady himself. This was dangerous territory. She was a guest in his home, dependent on his protection and generosity. She had been through tremendous trauma and was still healing. He had no right to burden her with his feelings, especially when she might not share them. She had never given any indication that she saw him as anything more than a kind friend and employer. So he tried to push the feelings down, to maintain the easy friendship they had built. But it grew harder each day, especially during the moments when their hands would brush while passing tools, or when she would smile at him across the dinner table, or when he would hear her singing softly to herself while cooking. Penelope, for her part, was experiencing her own private revelation. She had been at the ranch for nearly 2 months when she finally admitted to herself that she loved Brennan Kessler. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. After everything that had happened with Silas and her father, she had believed herself incapable of trusting any man again. But Brennan was different. He was patient and kind, teaching her new skills without ever making her feel foolish for not knowing. He respected her opinions and listened when she spoke. He had given her space and safety to heal, never once pressuring her or making her feel like she owed him anything beyond honest work. He was strong but gentle, capable but humble. He made her laugh and made her feel valued in a way she never had before. She found herself watching him when she thought he was not looking, admiring the capable way he moved, the concentration on his face when he worked with his hands, the rare but beautiful smile that transformed his serious features. She noticed how he always checked to make sure she had eaten enough, how he left wildflowers on the kitchen table sometimes after his morning rounds, how he patiently answered her endless questions about ranch life. But she was afraid to say anything. She had brought enough trouble into his life already. The last thing he needed was the complication of romantic feelings from a woman who was essentially a fugitive. Besides, he had never given any indication that he saw her as anything other than a friend and employee. He was unfailingly polite and respectful, never crossing any boundaries. So they continued their careful dance, both in love but neither willing to risk the fragile peace they had built by speaking the truth aloud. October brought cooler weather and the first hints of the coming winter. Brennan hired on 2 extra ranch hands for the fall roundup, men he had worked with before who asked no questions about the woman helping around the place. They spent 10 days gathering cattle, separating calves for weaning and culling animals for sale. Penelope proved invaluable, cooking for the crew and helping with the endless record keeping the work required. When the hired hands finally departed, Brennan and Penelope found themselves alone again, and the house seemed too quiet after the activity of the previous days. They settled back into their routine, preparing for winter by checking the integrity of the barn roof, stocking the root cellar, and making sure they had sufficient firewood. It was a cold evening in late October when everything changed. They had finished dinner and were sitting before the fireplace, Penelope mending one of Brennan's shirts while he worked on repairing a saddle. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and promising an early winter. "Brennan," Penelope said suddenly, setting down her sewing. "Can I ask you something?" He looked up from his work. "Of course. Why did you keep driving that day? When you found me in your wagon, you could have turned around and taken me straight back to Pueblo. You could have washed your hands of the whole situation, but you just kept going. Why?" Brennan was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer carefully. "I looked into your eyes," he finally said, "and I saw someone who needed help, someone who was terrified and desperate. I could not, in good conscience, ignore that. My mother raised me to believe that we have a responsibility to help those in need when we have the power to do so." "It was more than that, though," Penelope pressed gently. "You have given me a home, a job, safety. You have treated me with more kindness and respect than my own father ever did. You have asked for nothing in return. I need to understand why." He set aside the saddle and met her eyes across the firelight. "Because you deserve those things, Penelope. You deserve to be safe and respected and valued. Any man worth his salt should see that." "And what do you see when you look at me now?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Brennan's heart pounded in his chest. This was the moment, he realized. He could deflect, could retreat behind politeness and propriety, or he could take the risk and tell her the truth. He chose truth. "I see a woman who is brave and strong and beautiful," he said slowly, each word weighted with meaning. "I see someone who makes me laugh and challenges me to be better. I see someone who has turned this house into a home just by being in it. I see someone I have come to care for very deeply." Penelope's breath caught. "How deeply?" "So deeply that it terrifies me," Brennan admitted. "I know I have no right to feel this way. You came here seeking safety, not romance. But I cannot help it, Penelope. I have fallen in love with you." The confession hung in the air between them. Brennan held his breath, waiting for her to pull away, to tell him gently that she did not feel the same, that she valued his friendship but nothing more. Instead, she stood and crossed to where he sat, kneeling before him just as he had knelt before her that first night. She took his face in her hands, her touch infinitely gentle, and smiled with tears shining in her eyes. "You have every right," she whispered, "because I have fallen in love with you too." The kiss was inevitable, a natural culmination of months of building emotion. Brennan cupped her face carefully, as if she were made of something precious and fragile, and touched his lips to hers. The kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise, a question and an answer all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Brennan rested his forehead against hers. "Are you certain? I need you to be certain, Penelope. After everything you have been through, I will not pressure you into anything." "I am certain," she said firmly. "What I feel for you is nothing like what I was supposed to feel for Silas. This is real and true and my choice. I choose you, Brennan. I choose this life, this place, this love, if you will have me." "If I will have you," he laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. "Penelope Vance, I would be honored beyond measure to have you, in whatever way you will give me, for as long as you will stay." She kissed him again, deeper this time, and he felt years of loneliness and isolation melt away in the warmth of her embrace. They stayed by the fire long into the night, talking and kissing and making plans for a future they had both stopped believing was possible. The next morning, Brennan woke with a lightness in his heart he had never experienced before. They discussed their situation over breakfast, both giddy and serious in turns as they navigated this new territory. "We should probably get married," Brennan said, then flushed at how unromantic it sounded. "I mean, if you want to. For legal protection as much as anything. If we are married, Silas cannot claim any rights to you. You would be legally bound to me instead." "That is terribly romantic," Penelope teased, but her eyes sparkled with happiness. "But yes, I think marriage is a good idea. though perhaps we should discuss it a bit more before we rush off to find a preacher." "Absolutely," Brennan agreed quickly. "I want to do this properly. Court you the right way, even if the circumstances are unusual." "I think perhaps we have been courting for months without realizing it," Penelope observed. "All those evenings on the porch, all those conversations over dinner, that was courtship, was it not?" "I suppose it was." Brennan reached across the table to take her hand. "But I still want to do some things properly. I want to ask you correctly, make sure you know what you are agreeing to." Penelope squeezed his hand, her expression turning serious. "I know exactly what I would be agreeing to, Brennan. A life of hard work and modest means on a remote ranch. Early mornings and late nights, harsh winters and hot summers. Being far from towns and society and all the comforts I grew up with," she smiled. "And I want it. I want all of it because it would be with you. Because this life, this simple, honest life, is worth more to me than all the grand parties and fine dresses in Boston ever were." "I cannot promise you an easy life," Brennan said quietly, "but I can promise you an honest one. I can promise you a partner who will respect you and cherish you and work alongside you. I can promise you that you will never have to fear being struck or silenced or sold again. And I can promise you all the love in my heart for as long as I live." "Then ask me," Penelope whispered. "Ask me properly." Brennan stood and came around the table, then took her hand and knelt before her, looking up into those violet eyes that had haunted his dreams for months. "Penelope Vance, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Will you build this life with me, share the struggles and the triumphs, the ordinary days and the special ones? Will you marry me?" "Yes," she breathed, pulling him up so she could kiss him. "Yes, absolutely yes." They decided to travel to Las Animas, to marry as soon as possible, both eager to secure the legal protection marriage would offer and simply to begin their life together properly. But first, they needed to address the elephant in the room, the possibility that Sela's or Penelope's father might still be searching for her. "I have not seen or heard anything suspicious," Brennan said as they planned their trip. "No strangers asking questions, no unusual activity. It has been nearly 3 months. It is possible they have given up the search. Or they have simply not looked this far from Pueblo yet," Penelope countered. "We need to be careful. Perhaps we should change my name before we go into town, just in case." They decided that Penelope would use her mother's maiden name, Whitaker, for the marriage certificate. It was close enough to the truth that she would not stumble over it, but different enough that it would not raise red flags if anyone came asking questions about a Penelope Vance. 3 days later, they made the journey to Las Animas in Brennan's wagon, the same wagon where they had first met. Penelope sat beside him on the bench seat, no longer hiding but openly there, his hand clasped in hers. The October day was crisp and clear, the sky an endless blue overhead. Las Animas was a small but growing town, with a main street lined with shops and businesses. Brennan drove them straight to the church, a modest white building with a simple steeple. The minister, Reverend Thomas, was a kind elderly man who asked few questions when Brennan explained they wanted to be married as soon as possible. "Young love cannot wait, I understand," he said with a gentle smile. "Do you have witnesses?" Brennan had thought of this and had asked James and Sarah Mitchell, a couple who owned the general store and whom he had known for years. They arrived quickly, delighted to participate in what they called a romantic surprise wedding. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Penelope wore her cleanest dress, one Brennan had purchased for her in Pueblo weeks ago, and had woven wildflowers into her hair. Brennan wore his best suit, brushed clean and pressed for the occasion. They stood before Reverend Thomas, and spoke their vows with voices that shook with emotion but never wavered in conviction. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and told Brennan he could kiss his bride, the kiss was sweet and pure and full of promise. Sarah Mitchell wiped tears from her eyes, and even James looked suspiciously misty. They signed the marriage certificate, Penelope writing Penelope Whitaker in careful script, and Brennan paid the minister's fee. The Mitchells insisted on treating them to lunch at the town's small restaurant, and they spent a pleasant hour sharing a meal and accepting congratulations from curious townspeople who drifted over to meet Brennan's surprise bride. As they were leaving the restaurant, preparing to collect their supplies and head back to the ranch, a man Brennan did not recognize approached them on the street. He was well dressed in city clothes with a thick mustache and calculating eyes. "Excuse me," the man said, tipping his hat. "I could not help but overhear that you just got married. Congratulations to you both. Might I ask the bride's name? You look terribly familiar, miss." Penelope stiffened, but Brennan squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Mrs. Kessler," he said firmly, "and I am afraid we are in a hurry." "Good day to you, sir." He guided Penelope quickly toward their wagon, aware of the man's eyes following them. Once they were settled and moving out of town, Penelope let out a shaky breath. "That was one of Silas's men. I am certain of it. He was at the house several times when Silas came to dinner. Did he recognize you? I do not know. Maybe, probably." Her hands twisted in her lap. "Oh God, what if he tells Silas? What if they come to the ranch?" "Then we will deal with it," Brennan said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "You are my wife now, Penelope. Legally married. Even if Silas tries to claim some prior arrangement, the law will recognize our marriage. You are protected." "The law might recognize it, but that does not mean Silas will accept it. He is not a man who takes kindly to losing something he believes he owns." Brennan felt anger rise hot in his throat. "You are not a possession. You never were, and I will not let anyone take you away from me. We will be ready if they come." They traveled in tense silence for a while, both lost in worried thoughts. But as the familiar landscape of the ranch came into view, some of the anxiety eased. This was home, their home now. Whatever came, they would face it together. That night, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and care. Brennan was gentle and patient, attentive to Penelope's needs and responses, determined to make this experience as different as possible from anything she might have feared. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed they would now share, Penelope's head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I never thought I could be this happy," she whispered into the darkness. "I never thought I could feel this safe." Brennan pressed a kiss to her hair. "I will spend every day trying to make sure you continue to feel that way." The next few weeks passed in blissful domesticity. They worked the ranch together during the day and spent their evenings learning each other in new and wonderful ways. Penelope bloomed under Brennan's love and attention, growing more confident and relaxed. The shadows that had haunted her eyes when she first arrived faded almost completely, but the peace could not last forever. It was a cold November morning when 3 riders appeared on the horizon, heading straight for the ranch house. Brennan saw them from the corral where he was working with one of the horses. His stomach dropped. "Penelope," he called sharply. She emerged from the chicken coop, took one look at his face, and understood immediately. "Inside," he ordered. "Stay there unless I tell you otherwise." She wanted to argue, he could see it in her eyes, but she nodded and hurried into the house. Brennan retrieved his rifle from the barn and positioned himself on the porch, waiting as the 3 men rode into his yard. The man in the center was clearly Silas Garrett. He was exactly as Penelope had described. Late 40s, well-dressed, with an air of arrogant authority. The two men flanking him were clearly hired muscle, hands resting casually near their holstered guns. "Mr. Kessler, I presume," Silas said, not bothering to dismount. "My name is Silas Garrett. I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I do not know what you are talking about," Brennan replied evenly, his finger resting near the trigger of his rifle. "Do not play games with me, Penelope Vance. She is here, is she not? One of my men saw her in Las Animas a few weeks ago, though she seems to have foolishly attempted to disguise herself by getting married." Silas's lip curled in disgust. "Whatever arrangement you made with her, whatever she promised you, I am prepared to compensate you generously if you hand her over without difficulty." "There is no arrangement to break," Brennan said coldly. "Penelope is my wife, legally married in front of witnesses and a minister of God. She is not going anywhere." "Your wife," Silas laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. "You think a rushed marriage to some dirt farmer overrides the contract I have with her father? I paid good money for that girl, and I intend to collect what is mine." "She is not a commodity to be bought and sold," Brennan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "She is a human being with rights and autonomy, and she made her choice. She chose me. Now I am going to have to ask you gentlemen to leave my property." Silas's expression darkened. "You are making a terrible mistake, Mr. Kessler. I am a powerful man with considerable resources. I can make your life very difficult if you choose to be obstinate about this." "Threaten me all you want," Brennan replied. "My answer will not change. Penelope stays here with me, where she belongs." Before Silas could respond, the door to the house opened and Penelope stepped out onto the porch. Brennan wanted to order her back inside, but the look on her face stopped him. She stood tall and proud, her chin lifted defiantly. "I am not your property, Silas," she said clearly. "I never was and I never will be. Whatever arrangement my father made with you is invalid because I never consented to it. I am married to Brennan Kessler by my own choice, and nothing you say or do will change that." Silas's face flushed with rage. "Your consent is irrelevant. Your father had every right to arrange your future as he saw fit. You are being childish and ungrateful, just as you always were. But I am prepared to overlook your disobedience if you come with me now. We can still salvage this situation." "No," Penelope said simply. "I will not now or ever willingly go with you. Please leave." Silas turned his attention back to Brennan. "Name your price. How much will it take for you to dissolve this sham marriage and return her to me?" "There is no price," Brennan said flatly. "Now, I have asked you politely to leave. If you do not, I will be forced to make you leave, and I do not think you will enjoy how that plays out." One of Silas's men moved his hand closer to his gun, but Silas held up a restraining hand. He stared at Brennan and Penelope for a long, tense moment, his eyes full of calculation and barely contained fury. "This is not over," he finally said. "You have made powerful enemies today, both of you. Mark my words, you will regret this decision." "I seriously doubt that," Brennan replied. Silas wheeled his horse around and spurred it into a gallop, his men following close behind. Brennan and Penelope stood on the porch until the riders disappeared over the horizon. Then Penelope sagged against him, all her bravado draining away. "He will be back," she whispered. "Or he will send others. He does not forgive slights like this." "Maybe," Brennan acknowledged, wrapping his arms around her. "But we will be ready. And Penelope, he is right about one thing. I am just a dirt farmer, but out here that means something. This is my land and I know every inch of it. If he wants a fight, he will get one, but it will be on my terms." Over the next few weeks, Brennan took precautions. He rode into Las Animas and spoke with the sheriff, a practical man named Tom Carson who had known Brennan for years. He explained the situation, showed him the marriage certificate, and asked what legal protections they might have. Sheriff Carson listened carefully and then nodded. Your marriage is legal and binding. No matter what arrangement her father made, she is your wife now and he has no legal claim to her. If this Silas fellow tries anything, you have every right to defend your property and your family. I will document all this in my records, just in case. Brennan also quietly purchased more ammunition and made sure his weapons were in good working order. He taught Penelope how to shoot, both rifle and pistol, and was impressed by how quickly she picked up the skills. They established emergency protocols, places she could hide or escape to if the ranch was attacked while he was out working. But as November turned to December and then to January, with no further sign of Silas or his men, they began to cautiously hope that perhaps the threat had passed. Perhaps Silas had decided she was not worth the trouble after all, or had found some other unfortunate woman to marry. Winter settled over the ranch with a vengeance, bringing deep snows and bitter cold. Brennan and Penelope spent long evenings huddled by the fire, reading aloud to each other or simply talking about everything and nothing. They made plans for the spring, discussing expanding the herd and maybe planting a larger garden. Penelope talked about eventually teaching the children of ranch families in the area, using her education to benefit the community. On Christmas morning, Brennan gave Penelope a beautiful leather-bound journal he had ordered special from Denver, and she gave him a new saddle blanket she had woven herself in secret over many late nights. They exchanged gifts with shy smiles and tender kisses, marveling at how their lives had changed so dramatically in just 6 months. It was in late January, on a night when the wind howled and snow fell thick outside, that Penelope realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but had not wanted to say anything until she was certain. The realization filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She told Brennan that evening as they prepared for bed. He went very still, his eyes widening. Pregnant, you are certain? As certain as I can be without a doctor's confirmation, yes. She searched his face anxiously. Are you happy about it? In answer, he swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. Happy. Penelope, I am beyond happy. I am terrified and excited and overwhelmed and so full of love I think my heart might burst. We are going to have a baby. They held each other close, swaying slightly in the firelight, contemplating this new adventure they were about to embark on together. A family, something neither of them had really believed would be possible just a year ago. We should probably make sure we have a doctor available when the time comes, Penelope said practically. And I will need different clothes as I start to show. And we should probably convert the small storage room into a nursery. Brennan grinned at her tendency to immediately start planning and organizing. We have months yet to prepare. For now, let us just enjoy this moment. And they did, curled together in their bed while the storm raged outside. Safe and warm and completely in love, spring arrived in a rush of melting snow and budding trees. Penelope's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and she continued to help around the ranch as much as her growing belly would allow. Brennan fussed over her constantly, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work, which led to frequent good-natured arguments about what she was and was not capable of handling. In April, they made the trip to Las Animas to stock up on supplies and arrange for the doctor to be available when Penelope's time came. While in town, they heard troubling news. Silas Garrett's mining operations had hit a major vein of silver, making him wealthier and more powerful than ever. He had expanded his holdings throughout the region and was flexing his political muscle. Does he know about us? Penelope asked the store clerk who had mentioned Sela's. Could not say, madam, but Mr. Garrett does not come to Las Animas much. He operates mostly out of Denver and the mining camps further north. They returned to the ranch feeling uneasy, but tried not to let it overshadow their happiness. Brennan threw himself into preparing for the birth, building a beautiful cradle from cedar wood and making sure they had everything the baby might need. On a warm evening in early June, Penelope went into labor. Brennan rode like lightning to fetch Mrs. Mitchell, who had experience as a midwife, and then waited anxiously outside the bedroom while Penelope labored for 12 long hours. When he finally heard the thin, angry cry of a newborn, he burst into the room to find Penelope exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft cloth. A boy, Mrs. Mitchell announced with a proud smile. Big and healthy, with a good set of lungs on him. Brennan approached the bed on shaky legs and looked down at his son. The baby had a scrunched red face and a surprising amount of dark hair. His tiny fist waved in the air as if protesting his sudden entrance into the world. He is perfect, Brennan whispered, awed. Penelope, he is absolutely perfect. Do you want to hold him? Penelope asked, her voice hoarse but happy. Brennan took his son with careful reverence, cradling the tiny body against his chest. The baby settled immediately, his cries quieting as if he recognized his father's heartbeat. Brennan felt something inside him shift and lock into place, a fierce protective love unlike anything he had ever experienced. "Welcome to the world, little one," he murmured. "We are going to take such good care of you." They named him Benjamin, after Brennan's father, with the middle name James for the kind shopkeeper who had witnessed their wedding. Benjamin Kessler proved to be a relatively easy baby, sleeping well and feeding enthusiastically. Penelope took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, reading every book on child rearing she could get her hands on and approaching each new challenge with practical problem solving. Brennan was a devoted father, carrying Benjamin in a sling while he did his morning chores, talking to the baby constantly about everything he saw. Penelope would watch them from the porch, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. As Benjamin grew from newborn to infant, thriving in the clean air and sunshine of the ranch, Penelope and Brennan settled fully into their roles as parents and partners. The love between them had deepened into something profound and unshakable, built on mutual respect, shared labor, and the profound intimacy of building a life together from scratch. It was when Benjamin was about 4 months old that Silas Garrett made his final appearance in their lives. This time, he came alone, riding up to the ranch house on a fine black stallion. Brennan saw him coming and immediately sent Penelope and Benjamin inside with strict instructions to stay there. He met Silas in the yard, rifle in hand but not raised. Silas dismounted and approached with his hands visible and empty. "I am not here to fight," Silas said without preamble. "I am here to end this." "What does that mean?" Brennan asked warily. "It means I am offering you a deal. I will leave you and Penelope alone permanently. No more threats, no more harassment, no more attempts to reclaim what I have lost. In exchange, I want certain assurances." "What kind of assurances?" Silas pulled a document from his coat pocket. "I want Penelope to sign this affidavit stating that our engagement was broken by mutual consent and that she entered into marriage with you of her own free will. I want it witnessed and notarized. In exchange, I will sign this document permanently releasing any and all claims I might have had regarding her." Brennan studied him suspiciously. "Why? Why would you do this now after all this time?" "Because it is affecting my reputation," Silas admitted with barely concealed irritation. Word has spread that I lost my intended bride to a simple rancher. It makes me look weak and foolish. I have found another suitable woman to marry, someone more compliant and appropriate. But I need to settle the matter with Penelope cleanly so there are no questions or complications. So this is about your pride. Call it what you will. Do we have a deal or not? Brennan considered carefully. This could be a trap, some kind of trick. But the documents looked legitimate, and having a legal settlement would provide protection and peace of mind. He called out to Penelope. She emerged from the house, still wary but curious. When Silas explained his proposal, she read through the documents with careful attention. Finally, she looked up. If I sign this, you will never contact me or my family again. You will have no claims on me or my children. That is correct. We will both be free to move forward with our lives. Penelope met Brennan's eyes, a silent question. He nodded slightly, leaving the decision to her. She turned back to Silas. I will sign, but only if we do this in town with the sheriff as witness. I want this documented officially. Silas agreed, and 3 days later they all met in Sheriff Carson's office. With the sheriff and a notary present, Penelope signed the affidavit, and Silas signed his release of claims. Copies were made for all parties, and Sheriff Carson filed the originals with the county records. It is done then, Silas said stiffly when all the papers were signed. He looked at Penelope one last time, and something complicated passed across his face. I suppose I should say I hope you will be happy, but truthfully, I do not care either way. You were never what I wanted in a wife anyway. Too stubborn and opinionated. Good thing I found someone who appreciates those qualities then, Penelope replied coolly. Silas left without another word, and they never saw him again. They later heard through town gossip that he had indeed married a young woman from a wealthy Denver family who apparently suited him much better. He went on to become even more successful in mining and politics, but his path never crossed theirs again. With the threat of Silas finally and permanently resolved, Penelope and Brennan could truly relax into their life together. The years that followed were full of hard work and simple joys, challenges overcome and quiet moments of contentment. Benjamin grew into a bright, energetic boy with his mother's curiosity and his father's steady temperament. When he was 3, Penelope gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine, a sweet-natured child with violet eyes like her mother. 2 years later, another son arrived, Thomas, who proved to be the wild one of the family, always getting into mischief and making them laugh. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Brennan expanded the herd and improved the quality of his breeding stock. Penelope established a small school on the ranch, teaching not only their own children but also the children of neighboring ranchers who were hungry for education. She loved the work, loved seeing young minds light up with understanding and curiosity. They added rooms to the house as their family grew, building a larger kitchen and a proper schoolroom. The ranch became known for its hospitality, a place where travelers could always find a warm meal and friendly conversation. Penelope's cooking became legendary in the area, and Brennan's reputation as a fair and honest rancher grew. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Brennan took Penelope back to the spot where he had first discovered her hiding in his wagon, or as close as he could figure it. He had arranged for the children to stay with the Mitchells so they could have a rare evening alone. "You ever regret it?" he asked as they sat on a blanket watching the sunset. "All of this, the hard work, the isolation, the life you left behind." Penelope looked at him with such love it took his breath away. "Not for a single moment. This life, this family, it is everything I never knew I wanted. I was so lost back then, so trapped in a future I had not chosen. But you gave me the freedom to choose, and I chose this. I chose you. Best decision I ever made." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, tasting of love and promise and 10 years of shared history. "I was so afraid that day," he admitted. "Afraid to keep driving, afraid of what it might mean. But I looked into your eyes and I just knew. Knew you were important, knew I could not let you go. I did not understand it then, but I understand now. You were always meant to be mine, and I was always meant to be yours." "Fate brought us together in the most unlikely way," Penelope agreed. A desperate woman and a kind man and a dusty wagon on a Colorado road. Who would have thought it would lead to all this? They stayed out under the stars until late, talking and laughing and remembering, celebrating the beautiful life they had built together from the broken pieces of what had come before. As the years continued to pass, their children grew into fine young adults. Benjamin inherited his father's ranch and continued the family legacy, marrying a smart woman from Denver who reminded Penelope very much of herself. Catherine became a teacher like her mother, opening a school in Las Animas that served the whole region. Thomas, true to his adventurous nature, joined the cavalry and wrote long letters home about his experiences. Brennan and Penelope grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They celebrated births of grandchildren, mourned losses of friends and neighbors, and continued to work the ranch they both loved until their bodies made it clear it was time to let Benjamin take over fully. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch just as they had in those early days, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Sometimes they talked, sharing thoughts and memories. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, content in each other's presence. "Do you remember that first night?" Penelope asked one evening when they were both in their 70s. "When you found me under that tarp and just kept driving?" "I remember every detail," Brennan replied. "Your eyes, so scared and desperate, the way you trembled. The bruise on your face that made me want to hit something. The moment I decided to just keep going and let fate sort itself out." "Best decision you ever made," Penelope said with a smile. "Second best," Brennan corrected. "The best was asking you to marry me." She laughed, the sound still as bright and joyful as it had been 50 years earlier. "We have had a good life, have we not?" "The very best," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her weathered hand. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." They sat together as the stars began to emerge. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from courage, kindness, and love. Around them, the ranch hummed with life. Horses in the corral, cattle in the distance, lights glowing warm in the windows of the house where their son and his family now lived. This was their legacy, Penelope thought with deep satisfaction. Not just the land and the buildings and the thriving herd, but the family they had created, the love they had nurtured, the proof that even from the darkest circumstances, hope and happiness could bloom. Brennan seemed to read her thoughts, as he so often did after a lifetime together. "We did all right, did we not?" "We did better than all right," Penelope replied firmly. "We did wonderfully." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, two elderly people who had loved each other through triumph and hardship, who had built a life of meaning and purpose from a chance encounter on a dusty road. Their story was one of courage and kindness, of second chances and chosen family, of love that endured through decades and only grew stronger with time. The ranch Brennan had inherited from his parents had become something more under his and Penelope's care. A home in the truest sense, a place of safety and love and belonging. And it all started because a frightened woman had climbed into a wagon seeking escape, and a good man had looked into her eyes and decided to keep driving. Years later, when Penelope was 82 and Brennan 84, They celebrated their 55th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The house was full of noise and laughter. Multiple generations gathered to honor the couple whose love had started it all. Benjamin stood to make a toast, his own hair now gray but his eyes bright with emotion. To my parents, who taught me that true love is built on respect, partnership, and choosing each other every single day. Who showed me that where you come from matters less than where you choose to go, and who you choose to go there with. Catherine added her own toast, tears streaming down her face. To the bravest people I know, Mama, who had the courage to run from a life that was not her own and claim her freedom. Papa, who had the kindness to help a stranger and the wisdom to fall in love with her. Thomas, home from his military service, raised his glass with a grin. To the best parents a wild child could ask for, who loved me even when I drove them crazy and who proved that family is what you make it. As the party continued around them, Penelope and Brennan slipped away to their favorite spot on the porch. The sunset was spectacular that evening, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson and purple. 55 years, Penelope marveled. It has gone by so fast. And yet I remember every moment, Brennan said. Every laugh, every tear, every ordinary day that somehow became extraordinary because I got to spend it with you. Do you think we would have found each other if I had not hidden in your wagon that day? Penelope wondered. Or were we always meant to find each other somehow? Brennan considered the question seriously. I think we were always meant to be together, but I am grateful beyond words that we found each other when we did, in the way we did. It made a good story for the grandchildren, at least. Penelope laughed and leaned her head on his shoulder. That it did. Our own personal fairy tale set in the Wild West with cowboys and ranches instead of castles and princes. I would not change a single thing, Brennan declared. Not one moment, not one choice, not one day. It was all perfect because it led me to you and this life we built together. They sat together as the sun disappeared below the horizon and the stars began their nightly dance across the sky. Inside, their family continued to celebrate, the sound of love and laughter spilling out into the evening air. This was happiness, Penelope thought. Not the absence of hardship or challenge, but the presence of love strong enough to weather any storm. It was waking up beside your best friend for 55 years and still finding new things to love about them. It was building something meaningful with your own hands and watching it flourish. It was knowing that whatever came, you would face it together. Brennan squeezed her hand gently and she squeezed back, a conversation without words that they had perfected over decades. In that simple gesture was everything. I love you, I choose you, I am grateful for you, I will always be here. The story of the cowboy who discovered a woman hiding under the tarp in his wagon and kept driving had become legend in their family, retold at gatherings and passed down through generations. But for Brennan and Penelope, it was not just a story. It was the beginning of everything that mattered. The moment when two broken people found each other and discovered they could heal together. As they grew even older, their days became quieter but no less full of love. They could no longer work the ranch, but they took joy in watching their children and grandchildren carry on the legacy. They spent their mornings reading together, their afternoons napping in the sunshine, their evenings on the porch watching the world go by. On a spring morning when Penelope was 89, she woke to find Brennan still sleeping beside her, his weathered hand clasped in hers. She studied his beloved face, memorizing every line and crease, every feature she had loved for over 60 years. His breathing was peaceful and even, and she felt a surge of gratitude for every day they had been given together. She thought about the frightened young woman she had been, desperate and alone, climbing into a stranger's wagon. She thought about the kind young man who had found her and chosen compassion over judgment. She thought about every moment that had followed, the fear and uncertainty, the growing trust, the blossoming love, the wedding, the children, the decades of partnership. If she could go back and tell that scared girl hiding under the tarp what the future held, what would she say? That everything would be all right, that she would find love and safety and a home, that she would know happiness beyond anything she could imagine. No, Penelope decided. She would not tell her anything. That girl needed to live through every moment, feel every emotion, make every choice that would lead her here, because it was the journey that had made the destination so sweet. Brennan stirred beside her, his eyes opening slowly. When he saw her watching him, he smiled that same smile that had stolen her heart so many years ago. "Good morning, my love," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning," she replied, leaning over to kiss him softly. "I love you, and I love you, always have, always will." They rose together and began another ordinary day, made extraordinary by the simple fact that they were together. Brennan made coffee while Penelope prepared breakfast, their movements synchronized by decades of practice. They ate together, discussing nothing and everything, comfortable in the way only truly compatible souls can be. After breakfast, they walked slowly out to the porch, settling into the chairs that had been specially made for their aging bodies. The ranch spread before them, alive with activity as Benjamin and his sons worked the cattle. In the distance, they could see Catherine arriving with her husband, probably coming to check on them as she did every few days. "We are blessed," Penelope said quietly, "to have had all this. To have found each other and built this family and this life. We are so very blessed." "That we are," Brennan agreed, reaching for her hand. "Every single day with you has been a blessing, Penelope. From that first moment when I pulled back the tarp and saw you looking up at me with those beautiful eyes, I knew my life was about to change. I just did not realize how completely, how wonderfully." She squeezed his hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the strength that had held her through every storm. "You saved me that day, not just by keeping me safe from Silas, but by showing me what love could really be, what partnership could really mean. You gave me a life worth living." "And you gave me a reason to live it," Brennan replied. "I was so lonely before you came, so focused on just surviving day to day. You taught me how to truly live, how to love, how to build something that matters." They sat together in peaceful silence, hands clasped, hearts full. Around them, the ranch hummed with the life they had created and nurtured. This was their legacy, not just land and cattle, but love and family, and the proof that kindness and courage could transform everything. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, warming their old bones, Penelope thought about the girl she had been and the woman she had become. She thought about the cowboy who had kept driving when he could have turned back, who had chosen trust over fear, who had loved her completely and without reservation for more than 60 years. Their story was extraordinary in its ordinariness. Two people who had found each other, chosen each other, and built a beautiful life together through hard work and dedication. There were no grand gestures or dramatic moments, just a steady accumulation of small choices made with love, day after day after day. And in the end, was that not the truest kind of love story? Not the lightning bolt of passion that burned out quickly, but the steady flame that warmed you through decades of winters, that guided you home through every darkness, that kept burning until your very last breath. Brennan and Penelope lived out their remaining years in quiet contentment, surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had nurtured. They passed within months of each other, Brennan going first in his sleep at 91, and Penelope following 3 months later at 89, her hand reaching out in her final moments as if seeking his. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath matching headstones that read simply, Brennan Kessler, beloved husband, father, grandfather, and Penelope Kessler, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. But those who knew them understood that those simple words could not possibly capture the depth of their love or the beauty of their story. The ranch continued on, passed down through Benjamin to his children and grandchildren, each generation adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation that Brennan and Penelope had built. The tale of how they met, of the woman hiding under the tarp and the cowboy who kept driving, became family legend, told and retold until it took on an almost mythical quality. But for those who had known them, who had witnessed their love firsthand, no embellishment was needed. The simple truth was powerful enough. Two people had found each other against impossible odds, had chosen each other despite every reason not to, and had built a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. Their story was a reminder that sometimes the most important moments in life come from the simplest decisions, from choosing kindness over convenience, trust over fear, love over loneliness. It was a reminder that family is not just what you are born into but what you build with courage and commitment. It was a reminder that true love is not found but created, day by day, choice by choice, through years of partnership and patience. The wagon where they first met was preserved by their descendants, kept in a place of honor in the barn, a tangible reminder of where it all began. Children would climb into it and imagine that fateful day, trying to picture their great-grandmother hiding beneath the tarp, their great-grandfather discovering her and making the choice that would change everything. And on quiet evenings, when the sunset painted the Colorado sky in brilliant colors and the ranch settled into peaceful rest, those who visited their graves swore they could feel something special in that place. A lingering presence of love so strong it had soaked into the very earth. The story of Brennan and Penelope Kessler lived on, not just in family memory, but in the legacy they left behind. A thriving ranch, a strong family, and the proof that even in the harsh and unforgiving landscape of the Wild West, love could not only survive but flourish into something beautiful and enduring. Their love story began with a frightened woman seeking escape and a kind man offering help, but it became so much more than that. It became a partnership built on mutual respect, a romance sustained by daily choice, a family created through courage and commitment. It became a testament to the transformative power of love, to the possibility of finding home in another person, to the beauty that can grow from even the most desperate circumstances. And it all started because a cowboy discovered a woman hiding under the tarp in his wagon, and instead of turning back, instead of demanding answers or seeking the easy path, he simply kept driving, trusting in kindness and fate to show him the way. That single decision, that moment of compassion and courage, created a legacy of love that would echo through generations. A reminder that the choices we make in moments of crisis can shape not just our own lives, but the lives of countless others yet to come. In the end, Brennan and Penelope's story was not about grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though it had elements of both. It was about two people who found each other when they needed it most, who chose each other every day, who built something beautiful from broken pieces, and who loved each other with a depth and constancy that time could not diminish. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, rugged and real, tested by hardship but made stronger by it, rooted in the land but reaching toward the stars. It was the kind of love that builds civilizations, that turns houses into homes, that transforms ordinary lives into extraordinary legacies. And it all began on a hot August day in 1876, on a dusty road in Colorado, when a cowboy discovered a woman hiding under the tarp in his wagon and made the simple, perfect choice to keep driving,